pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join us in a moment of silence. All right, we're going to start off with item 1 on the agenda, which is citizen concerns. Any citizen that is heard for anything that is not already on the agenda? Come right on up, state your name and address for the clerk.
My name is Val Yukon, 1512 South Lynn Street, Sioux City, 51106. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come up. Question for all of you, was anyone here at the Prosperity House yesterday when Governor Reynolds came?
I was not, I was working.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Justin, last time I was here, you and we kind of had a conversation, and it was regarding some of the individuals on our streets. But what I want to share with you is we have an individual at Hope Street that in 6 months usually spent about $500,000 between the hospital, police, and fire department. This individual is at Hope Street now. He is doing well. But my point here is I know that there is funds coming into our community. And Justin, again, we're going to be friends. I know we are. But, you mentioned that there's people out there that don't want to get help. But there are people out there that do want to get help. It costs about $200,000 to run Hope Street. It has 10 men at the Sober Living, and at the Prosperity House, there is 6 men. And at the Prosperity House, they take care of everything on their own. All 6 men work, pay the bills there. My point is for $200,000 a year, we can help individuals. We have 31 men that have successfully gone through Hope Street, that have jobs, reconnected with their families, that pay taxes in our community. And this is what some of the funds from the ARPA funds can do. I understand there are people that struggle to find that help, but there are people there that can receive this help, but it's hard to keep like Hope Street running without some additional help from the community. We had 31 people. The first year, we didn't want to track or we didn't want to boast because I think we had like 11 people that was successful, and we wanted to go another year. We are going into 3 years, June 18th this year. 31 people that are paying taxpayers. That's bringing money into our community instead of spending the $500,000 in 6 months. And honestly, I don't know how long that individual was on the street. But if he was on there for 1 year, you can do the math. Please consider how to spend or how to appropriate some of those funds. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else to be heard? Anything that's not on the agenda? All right, moving on. I'll move on to approval of the agenda. I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Or, do we have Matthew or not?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Moving on to consent agenda. Items 3 through 7 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3 is approval of the minutes of the May 31st, 2022 meeting. Item 4 is approval of claims. Item 5 from Board Administration A is approval of Resolution for a tax suspension for DM. And B is approval of lifting tax suspensions for petitioners who failed to recertify their income or income does not qualify for continued tax suspension. Item 6 from Human Resources, approval of memorandum of personnel transaction. And item 7 from Board Administration, approval of notice of property sale resolution for parcel 8947341520221, also known as 715.5 Cunningham Drive, for Tuesday, June 21st at 4:35 p.m. That will end the consent agenda. If no one has anything else, I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item 8, secondary roads. A is approve the plans for project parent B64.
Good afternoon. Mark Narrow, Woodbury County Engineer. Project B64 is replacement of a short span, single span bridge. We're utilizing a precast deck. Our plans are basically the contractor will set 2 new abutments and set the deck in place for us. It should be a fairly quick in and out on this bridge once it's done. It's replacing a bridge that's currently posted 3 tons. This bridge has seen some severe damage in the last couple of floods. It's a very good one to get replaced and helps clear out one of those other bridges that's an impediment for our ag producers in that area. I recommend approval of the plans and signatures by the board.
I'll move that.
Second. Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to 8B, approve the certificate of completion for overburden removal with Leroy and Sons of Arcadia, Iowa for $85,600.
Leroy and Sons has completed their work. This is part of the preparation for our gravel road improvement program, the $10 million TIF funded project that is now underway. I recommend approval of the completion certificate.
I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Taking me out there.
Yep.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Item 9 from our zoning coordinator, Dan Priestley. A is to receive the final staff report and P&Z Commission recommendation from their 6/1/22 meeting.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Dan Priestley, Community and Economic Development. This proposal before you is a basic one-lot subdivision, 3.59 acre, basically to split the house off of some agricultural land. It's identified as parcel number 8946034000006. It's located in the Concord Township. This went through the Zoning Commission, has received their recommendation. The county engineer found the proposal in compliance with Iowa Code closure requirements, and the lots have adequate access. Extraterritorial review was not required, and again, the Zoning Commission sends their recommendation.
All right, well, I'll move to receive that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. And item B is approve the Williams Third Strike Second Edition Final Plat and authorize chairman to sign the resolution.
And again, that's the same subdivision as referenced, and everything appears in order.
All right, I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10 from the Baker Group, Shane Albrecht and Building Services, Kenny Schmitz. The LEC ARPA Fund informational item.
Back in the May 24th Board of Supervisors meeting, the board asked or requested some line item categories for ARPA fund usage. Shane Albrecht with the Baker Group and Kevin Rost, our architect with Goldberg Goldberg Group Architects have formulated that list. They're here today, and I'd like them to come up and speak to their spreadsheet and those categories.
Mr. Chairman, I think you all have this in your packet, but can I ask you to accept this document just to make sure you see Jeremy with it if that's okay?
Is that necessary if it's already in the backup? We already got it in the backup.
You got it, everybody? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Joshua, do you have a copy? Okay. So, we were requested to kind of take and give you some categories. So what we did was, we took Sarpy County's thing and we kind of picked what our jail has for things, and we lined those into the different categories. We put dollar amounts based on the square footage that we have and the quantity that we have in your jail. So I know if you do the math, that doesn't add up to 4.2 million, all the things on the right. But we wanted to put it so that if you got an outside auditing firm, they could pick which parts of them they feel the most comfortable to use, which parts your county attorney felt most comfortable to use. So we only needed it to add up to 4.2. That's why it says 4.2. But as you can see above it, there's a lot more dollars there than that.
Correct. Yeah, I think the totals there were close to $11 million.
11.3.
11.3 in totality. So again, we wanted to bring these up to you guys, just areas that we saw, working with Shane and working with Dennis Butler as well too, going through the final rules for the spending requirements for the ARPA funds. We felt these were appropriate and easily justifiable based on our interpretation of those rules. So we can kind of run down through them, or if you guys have questions, we can talk about any of them or all of them.
I have a question.
All right.
Is the design fee also for example, a 12% percentage of the HVAC row, or is the design fee just the total design fee for each category?
Sorry, Matthew, I could barely hear you, but it sounded like you were talking or asking the question if the 12% is the design fee for each one of those?
Yes, is the design fee column, is that the portion or is that the total?
So the design fee column there is based on our contract, which I believe is 7.35% of the total project cost. So for each one of these categories that we broke out, for instance, on the indoor-outdoor rec area, we've got 2,000 square feet of those, 1,000 square foot on each floor. Total construction cost was, for that piece of the project, was a little over $1 million. The associated design fee for ourselves, for our consultants, our engineers, so forth, is at 7.35% of that. That makes sense. And then the total is all the way to the right, that 1.092390. And that's what we did for each category. The HVAC, cost of the HVAC was approximately $6 million. I think once we got into a little bit further, it was a little bit over $6 million. Basically what I did was a percentage of that was improvements similar to what Sarpy County had done, was roughly 12% of the overall mechanical cost of their project. So I did the same thing following a similar rationale on that. That makes sense. Not the total cost of the HVAC system.
Go ahead.
So two questions. One, I'm assuming that the design fees can be paid for by ARPA, and that's why they're included. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. And then the second one is, without getting into the weeds on the improved ventilation, there's, I'm sure, some technical specifications to say this is over and above what would typically be designed or what was previous.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any?
For the video visitation, is 100% of that room attributed, or what are the percentages for the other rows, like intake and medical and et cetera?
So the video visitation one is, yeah, that's the specific room, separate space for the public on the video visitation side of that. We did not include the video visitation units that would be in the pods themselves or that whole system. We just included that constructed space.
And that is 100%, Matthew, to your question. That's 100% of that constructed space for the video visitation. It's not any other percentage than that. That's how many square footage they're multiplied by the building cost per square foot to give the total.
And similarly with the...
Same for intake and medical?
Same for intake and medical, yeah, you're absolutely correct.
What is on the Polyureas coated steel jail cells, is that something that is designed toward that 4.2, or is that just a placeholder for the standard allowance?
So the polyurea coated jail cells is something above and beyond. So on this, the coating itself is an antimicrobial coating. It's also MAR resistant and adheres to detention. In addition to that, we put showers and toilets and labs in each one of the cells, so they didn't have any gang showers or gang bathrooms like they do in the current facility now, basically for better separation between individuals. So that's why we included those pieces with that.
I appreciate it, that makes sense.
Yep.
Anybody else?
You referenced Sarpy County a couple times. When you were putting this together, did you drill down into specific provisions that Sarpy was relying on for any of these categories? Because I know part of what they did initially was relied on the interim rule. So I just want to make sure that none of these categories are things that are available under the interim rule, but not under the final rule.
Yeah, and I know we referenced Sarpy. I know I said I've worked with Shane as well as Dennis on the final rules of that, and our interpretation of that seems to be in accordance with what they've done with a lot of their stuff as well too. So I think these easily fit the categories. I think Dennis, you may even have the specific categories for each one.
1.4. For most of it, it's all 1.4, which is mitigation, spacing. Has several things in there, which I'm going to have in a letter next week to you gentlemen. Breaking out the ones that feel the most applicable. I think all these are, but we picked out ones where we're pretty much 99.9% sure. Because they've already had those approved by a consulting firm down in Sarpy County.
I think we need to be a little bit cautious on, for instance, intake and medical being at 100%, because we would obviously need intake regardless of COVID, and so to find what that appropriate percentage is, I think would make our board attorney a little happier. But these are just overall categories from what I'm gathering that you think could apply.
Right. And so, yeah, things like intake, obviously we would have had before. We designed a little bit differently for more single occupancy, holding cells in there as well as pre-booking. So they can have them searched or tested or whatever before they enter the facility with the slam cells out there. So there's several things we can look at and get into that in detail. But again, keep in mind, we've approximated over $11 million worth of potential here, and we're only looking for 4.2 theoretically. So if the decision was made that some of these may not be relevant, then we still have a little bit of fluff in there per se. But I think in our interpretation of this, I think we feel pretty confident all 11.2 million of this is applicable to the ARPA fund usage. So
That's great news.
any other questions?
All right, seeing no other questions, we're going to move on. Item 11 from Board Administration. Thank you, guys. 11A is discussion approval of transfer of appropriation in the Sheriff's FY22 budget due to employee transfers.
Okay, this is something we do annually because on sheriff's budget, they do move people from patrol to civil to jail. They move them all around. This is just getting toward the end of the year, get the money in the proper places. So it's just a transfer from one department to the other. It's not increasing expenditures at all. It's just a, whatever, 100 or 200 equal both ways.
I'll go ahead and
It just balances it out.
I'll move this.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. 11B is discussion on a proposal for technical and advisory services for the Administration of American Rescue Plan Act Program and Master Services Agreement with UHY Consulting, Inc.
Okay, we've been talking somewhat to try and get some kind of consulting firm. There's one over Baker Tilly over in Waterloo, Blackhawk County, which they are hiring. They're out of Minnesota. The one we're looking at is UHY Advisors, and they're actually doing Sarpy County. Possibly a couple of supervisors may call down and talk to Bill Conley, and they may also call Jack Reagan. I believe Matthew's going to try to see Jack, who is with the UHY Advisors. He's their director. And
I've already spoken to him.
did you get a chance to talk to him?
Yeah, I spoke to him for a good hour or so. So
Okay,
chime
what
in when you're done.
kind of a feeling did you come out with?
Oh, well, so they're a big operation, obviously. If you look at their client list, the closest one to us is Sarpy County. For that project, they are looking at, utilizing some of the justifications in the interim rule. And a lot of it is not finalized. They're still working through the categories and what incremental increases do qualify. So that's specific to that project. But I'm warming up to the idea of having a consultant like this. I wasn't originally that thrilled about it just because it adds some cost, and these are policy decisions we have to make. But one area that I think we need to consider is that this sort of service is more important on the back end than the front end, and that is after we approve a project or set out on a goal, there still needs to be public-facing reporting, not simply just the quarterly reports due to Treasury that say how we spent it, but what a firm like this does is they provide, basically popular reports that we can host on our website that track the expenditures as they are spent. So we can say, for instance, 25% of this cost for the coating has been spent at this date, and this much has been approved. And that's important because, we rely on Baker Group for a small set of this consulting and reporting. But down the road, how is Dennis going to track exactly when we spent different things and publish that? So what they do, again, is they have like a public-facing report process, which just shows the public, a couple of years from now, exactly how we progressed in our goals and what we've set to avoid, some issues down the road. But they do provide several different levels of service, whether that's going to be more advisory or more reporting based on the back end. And the thing is they act as sort of a sounding board. A lot of different calls. There's about a dozen reps that are under Jack Reagan that would, one or a few of those would interface with us. But when we submit justification reports, what they would be doing is they would be, someone else, questioned earlier in the meeting tonight, they would be linking up the provisions and the codes, not the code sections, but the pages of the final rule, kind of as a footnote, like this is what we relied on here. And in the case of Sarpy County, or for us, if they rely on something that Treasury changes later, we would at least have that proof that this is what we worked on, this is what we did, knowing what we knew at the time. And Treasury is not going to, you're a lot safer with Treasury if you have that track record of this is the information we acted upon, and now that it's changed, we'll change, but this is what we acted upon, so.
I think Exhibit A got right back to the point where you have about 9 different items they will be doing. Matthew hit on a lot of them, but I think it's something that'll protect us, the Board of Supervisors, myself, Joshua, whoever's involved with this, to make sure these are proper expenditures, that we got well documented, trackable, and if we ever do get audited, they will be there to assist us through the audit.
Go ahead.
I really like the idea of doing this, especially because this isn't the only thing that we're continually looking at in terms of, the project at the LAC. I mean, we're looking at other things like in conservation and other things that would be good to have opinions on. My question comes down to, it talks about minimizing the risk of clawback. Are there provisions that specifically relate to if they give an opinion and that opinion's relied upon and it ends up not being assented to by the Department of Treasury? Do we have any kind of underwriting, so to speak, or is that part of this, or is that to be determined?
That's to be determined, right, Joshua? Isn't that the limit liability aspect of it? And they ran into this in Blackhawk County also. Same question we're asking right here. Who's liable? Now, if they say, yeah, this is all right, comes back, it isn't all right, we got to pay the bill, It's our money, not their money. But I don't know if they can actually guarantee 100%, 101%. We won't know until we go through it. But I don't think you can get them to pay for it. I don't think you can get any firm to pay for it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it needs to be 100%, but it's nice to have something where it's not just, well.
The one thing, and I don't understand the legal term on this, but Joshua might, they changed from gross negligence in theirs, contractor with a negligent. Now, I don't know what the difference is there.
Well, you're talking about the consultant that Blackhawk County used, but you're recommending a different consultant, right?
Yes, this is UHY, but
And
the
have
same
you,
limitations.
have you
basically.
talked with this consultant about?
Not yet on that section. We
Okay,
haven't
because,
talked.
yeah, what was provided had a 50,000, well, it limited any exposure of the consultant to the amount of the contract. And so I think the Sarpy County contract was either 50,000 or 100,000. And that's what Sarpy County agreed to, was that any exposure for the consultant was limited to that amount. I think that you should be able to negotiate a better provision than that, or as Dennis alluded to in the other consultant, they were willing to go further than that. And I'm sure there's other consultants out there beyond just these two. So I think that's something that we need to be careful about in the negotiation. We need to stand firm on.
I think the minimum threshold is you don't get paid, which is essentially what you're referring to.
Yes, and that's what Josh is referring to, yes.
But I think yours is something north of that, is that correct? Not
Well-
only do you not get paid, but you might expose your, or am I misinterpreting that?
What was presented to Dennis, I think that's kind of their standard form contract, had a limitation of liability that said, well, regardless of anything that happens, if the consultant is liable, what they were proposing was that the county would agree that the limitation of any liability would be the contract amount. So if we sign a $100,000 contract, essentially, and I view it in terms of, are they willing to stand behind their work or not? And they're basically saying, at least their initial proposal is, we'll stand behind it up to the contract amount. So I think with the amount of dollars at stake, and the fact that the board will be relying on the guidance that they give, you need to negotiate a better deal than that.
And that we can I'll get together with Joshua this week, we'll give them a call, because he should be back probably in his office by Thursday, I would think.
I'd almost rather pay a little more up front and have a little more exposure on their end, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It just seems like cheap insurance and with the amount of money we're talking about.
Talk to them, figure it out before next Tuesday.
Yeah, and from speaking to Jack, this was just very much a, like a template just to send to Dennis something for us to discuss. But, what we would settle on wouldn't, for any client probably wouldn't look exactly like this. It depends on what, how often you need service and what you want to be a sticking point. I think mostly what they provide is documentation of, just a documentation trail rather than any sort of a guarantee, even though that would be nice. When I asked, has any local government anywhere got a definitive yes from Treasury on anything, he said no, not yet. So about half of the jurisdictions have spent their ARPA funds at this point, but just to give you an idea, we're still not at the point where Treasury has even approved any specific questions, just in writing. So it's very much, there's expectation that there's going to be more changes over the several months and maybe even years on the regulations.
And to go along with what Matthew said, I mean, we're not asking for an insurance policy or a guarantee that what advice they give is ultimately going to be accepted or correct by the Treasury. We're just talking in terms of regular professional negligence or liability, if they meet that standard of, there are a lot of unanswered questions out there, and the standard is going to be whether they act as a reasonably prudent advisor. It's not going to be, I mean, they could act as a reasonably prudent advisor, given the information that's available now, and ultimately the treasurer could disallow it. So even when we do, if we are able to negotiate a better clause in the contract, it's still going to come back to that negligence standard, which is not necessarily an insurance policy.
The problem is, the treasurer will not make a decision until after you spend the money. So we gotta do the best we can to get the right consulting services, to give us the best advice they can give us, and back it up. That's the problem. You can't get pre-approval before you spend it. They won't do it.
I think these steps are showing that we're taking the right approach, and I'm appreciative of the authority identifying the different things, and we're trying to use outside expert opinions, so. It's not, I don't think anybody can accuse us of moving overly quickly.
No. And this ARPA money doesn't have to be spent right up front. It could be spent in December, it could be spent whenever it comes in. So there may be more rules, more tests already down the road here in 3 or 4 months. But the real test is when they look at and make determination, are we right or wrong? And that's just the risk everybody's taking right now.
Do you know what Bill's question was on the phone? Okay. We had somebody on the phone hung up. Any other questions then?
Another benefit to this will be if the consultant is able to identify money beyond the $4.2 million in the jail project that can be tied to a specific provision, then it essentially frees up money under the $10 million standard allowance. So, 4.2 is maybe a goal, but if there's a goal beyond that we can tie to specific provisions, like I said, if it would free it up for other projects.
All right. So,
We'll try to be back next week. I'll visit with Joshua this week. And
let's get the negligence down to just negligence instead of gross, and I think then it's probably a little better for protecting the county. All right, so 12A, County Auditor, authorize the chairman to sign a grant agreement between Woodbury County and the Iowa Secretary of State.
And essentially what you have before you, the two items are married. One of them is the HAVA grant through the Secretary of State's office for $10,000. And then the second one is a contract for software services, which allows us to do a much better job of managing precinct election officials and equipment in the future. I approached you asking for an additional person to train and retain precinct election officials, and that was denied. But this will help our current staff manage those entities, the precinct election officials, and our equipment during that period of time. So the first year it will be paid for by that HAVA grant, and then after that, anticipate is that the way you look at it, fortunately or unfortunately, I think it's unfortunate, but the Iowa legislature cut our early voting period in half. So there will be savings in all the elections coming up, at least that amount, because we went from 40 days of early voting to 20 days of voting. So we won't have staff and postage. There will be significant savings there.
I'd move it.
I'll second. So motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Any discussion? Any questions from the board? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. And 12B is authorize the chairman to sign an agreement between Woodbury County and Intex Software. I'll go ahead and move that.
And this, I just want to comment, I'll go ahead and get a second, please.
Second?
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. And go ahead.
I did run this by Joshua, and there was some language he asked to be removed, and it was removed. So.
In the agreement itself, or?
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion or questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
13 from Board of Supervisors. Keith, that's me. A is approval to increase hourly wage by $1.50 per hour for paramedics. I should have noted that this would be effective July 1st, 2022. Basically, having a meeting with one of our paramedics looking at comparables and having issues in hiring. We've already spent something like $13,000 in overtime, more than what was budgeted, and this is about what this budget item would cost if we were fully staffed. So I think it'd be an easy approval to move forward with and make it a little better to hire and retain here in the future. So that's why I have it on the agenda. Any questions?
I'll move it.
I'll second. So motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. Go ahead.
So just one question, are we doing this as a budget amendment potentially?
We'd have to find it probably from reserves because,
It'll be next year. We'll do the budget amendment for the next year in May of '23.
That's my only question is, when we did, I think it was approximately 215,000 when we bumped up. We kind of did that under the premise of a retention through ARPA.
Yeah, that did not require a budget amendment. That's
Right,
based
so what I'm
strictly on
wondering is there anything that would prohibit us from doing this? Same thing?
Using ARPA funds.
I mean, we did it for our.
And this is for retention, basically. They're trying to hire
Right,
people.
that's my point. We did it for collectively bargaining for sheriff's employees. And if the point is retention, I mean, I don't see where the difference is between the two, I guess.
I think it's a possibility. We want to do some further analysis on it, but it would be a possibility.
so we could have that as
Other,
part of the motion then. It could be potentially from ARPA or,
Yeah, I'm supportive of it either way. I just, if we can make a friendly amendment to the motion to look at that first, and then if that's not a qualifying thing, to do it from reserves.
I think you can just go ahead and do it the way it is and then bring back if it qualifies.
Use ARPA funds.
well, it could come under the budget amendment process too. It was,
Saying where the funds will come from.
Right.
yeah. All right,
Mr. Chair.
go ahead.
Speaking to other jurisdictions about this, it seems to be fairly common for governments to roll out retention bonuses piecemeal. Not as, I think the way we did it was great. It was as even as possible, but a lot of them forgot different categories and then did another motion for them, and then so there's just, it's kind of a, you just rely on this documentation, the comparables you mentioned, and just do your best to retain that data, because if you're going to do unequal allocations like this, then there doesn't seem to be a hard and set wall to it, but you do need to show substantiation. So.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes 5-0, and again, that's effective July 1st, 2022, so. 13B, consideration of ordinance relating to the assessment of wind energy conversion property as authorized by Iowa Code, Chapter 427B.26. Again, this is something that we've discussed. State legislature basically made it an either-or situation, so you are either going to have Chapter 427B or you will get utility replacement tax. This does not change whether or not a windmill is going to come next to you. This does not change anything now because it's an either-or. And the 427B property tax is significantly better for the county. We can also TIF these areas if need be. It is a no-brainer in my eyes. I don't know, I guess I'm not trying to insult anybody, but it's significantly more money. So I know we've discussed it a lot, and when there was a potential that, you know, you could try to get 100% value, well then, there was that potential, but now that's gone. So it's back again, and I'm gonna move it. So I'll move item B. No second?
Second.
Okay, I got a second. So motion by Raddick, second by Ung. Any questions or discussion on it? Go ahead.
I'll just say, I was originally opposed. I didn't think it was a fair deal or a fair shake. I'm not sure that I still feel that it is, but now that it's an either or, I think it's the lesser of two evils, and I think it's gonna be better for taxpayers in the end. And I don't wanna see Mid-American come in anyway and do what they're gonna do, and then we just take less tax from them. So that's the reason that I'm gonna, with no small amount of heartburn, support it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where now that it is an either or, I think we just will get the most money out of the process as far as for taxpayers. And like I said, if we TIF the area, then it can help pay for potential repairs to roads going to and from the windmills or wind towers or turbines or whatever you want to call them. Or we could just have it go to our general fund and spend it however, so.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure thing.
Where are we at on this? Is this I know we had.
It's final reading.
This is the final reading tonight?
I think we're in a posture where the board could go ahead and adopt it based on what was done previously. We've had public hearings, and I believe each time it was moved forward, just the board didn't actually adopt it after the final public hearing, so.
Go ahead.
Just so it's understood, when you look at this piece of paper here, the 37 million over 20 years doesn't all come to Woodbury County. It's apportioned out by each taxing district, so you portion out our share to Woodbury County, then that's actually portioned out to all your various funds. So even though it's a portion of Woodbury, all won't go to general basic, it'll go through all our funds. So
But
it'll be a windfall 37 million for Woodbury County.
Yeah, it does help every other taxing body though involved,
Yes,
so.
I'll get something, let's cut of this, yes.
Now that it's either or, it just feels like we got a gun to our head.
Yeah, well,
I don't like that.
yeah.
It doesn't feel like, I don't know, it just doesn't smell right.
Well, it is better. I just remember, you know, across the alley over there on the facilities Mid-American had, they were not able to get the property tax from those buildings. They only get utility replacement tax, and it's a very small amount, so. Yeah, yeah, I mean, it is.
No, I know, but here we are, now we got an either or, and we don't get, to me, what I've seen, we don't get, I don't know, legitimately fair taxable value on it, and yet, when you turn around, when I see my Mid-American bill, I'm being taxed on my utilities. So, I don't know, it just doesn't, it just doesn't seem right. It does not feel like, it's not a good, warm, fuzzy feeling on this deal.
Sure, we just need better lobbyists for ourselves and, guess any other questions or discussion on it? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, so passes 4-1. DeWitt opposed. Item 14, report on committee meetings. Go ahead.
I had three, the Les Hills, talked about with the legislature convening their hoped-for desire to have Iowa legislation. If you remember, that's the 3/8 of the potential 1 cent increase going to conservation did not happen this year. That group continues to want to see that pass for conservation purposes. And then with conservation being brought up, they're going to kind of tap the brakes, so to speak, pending the firm that we employ, given the ARPA funds, just to make sure I know this board to pass that. But anything that they can cite and provide will be good kind of underwriting, so to speak, and be consistent with what we're doing. And then had third judicial, discuss self-supervised probation, and caseload based on the risk assessment level and conviction charges. That's it.
Anything? Matthew, did you have any?
Yeah, I can give a fuller report on next Tuesday when my voice isn't as jumbled over the
phone?
speakers.
Sounds good. We had a department head meeting on Wednesday. I thought it was a good meeting. We had to move it over to here because we had a little water leak at the LEC right in front of the door. So the old LEC, boy, that's a great building. Yeah, it was probably actually water because I think it was an HVAC unit or something that was failing. So hopefully that doesn't cost too much. And hopefully we get in the new building sooner rather than later so we don't have to deal with that. But great meeting, talked a lot about, we had a workers' comp individual discussing our rate and the things that we're doing right and things that we can maybe do better. And I think it was a good meeting for everyone involved. Also on Friday, I had a MERD meeting. One thing, I'll just get you two highlights from that. One is discussing the new owner. MERD does get a say in whether or not that's approved, and they're discussing, whether or not the new, with the new owner, do they keep a buffet, which was bargained for originally, and now they're just saying casinos are going away from buffets. They just don't do those anymore. So they're having some discussion on that. The other thing that was uniquely curious to me is, I'm not really surprised by it, but this is the first month for the Hard Rock to experience a drop in some of that gaming revenue coming in about 2 years. So it's signs of a little bit of a slowdown in expendable funds. Like I said, I'm not surprised terribly myself, but that was brought up. Citizen concern, round 2. All right, board concerns.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
I've been tracking the meeting via the camera behind you guys, and I got bad news for Rocky. He's got a bald spot. But Joshua, you seem okay.
Glad mine's more in a spot.
I've been pulling my hair out sitting on this board, Matthew, so.
All right, anybody else? I guess I'm a little concerned about what's behind me now. All right, seeing nothing else, we're adjourned.